first game victory, at least right after that knight e5 and the tactics happened. But Jan Nepomniachtchi, he's showing that he can be resilient. He can fight back. I cannot believe he won that game. I mean, it looked like there was no chance, and there was a one-move blunder because of time trouble, and Jan, he capitalizes.
That was absolutely incredible. Yeah, Jan was doing well before when he took the pawn on c2. He could have also taken the pawn on b2. But after that, Magnus seemed to be out of the woods. He had that opportunity to go h5 on a couple of occasions. He missed it, and then it seemed to be just headed for a draw. But then he made that terrible blunder with f5, Robert.
Oh my goodness, what a howler. And I want to get the chat involved once again. Do you change your mind? A lot of you had Magnus winning. Do you still think that's going to be? It was just one game, I know, but Jan Nepomniachtchi, he's showing some good form in the first game, and here in the second, it looks like he's breaking open the queen side. Benjamin, it looks like a Roy Lopez, but it started as a Sicilian.
Exactly, yeah. It started off as a Russell Limo, and Black played this line with e5 and bishop to d6. Very creative. I think Hikaru's also played this a couple of times. At some point, White is going to go d4 or d3, and we will see a trade here. Black will have this backwards pawn on d7 or on d6, reminiscent of a Sveshnikov, but in return, Black has got a lot of piece activity.
Yeah, it looked like a Spanish, a Sveshnikov, that backwards d pawn, as you're pointing out. It could be a problem, but look at this pawn on b5. It's either a bad pawn because White can target it, and look at Jan not sure how to take on d3. It takes with the queen, and that bishop on d6 is under threat. So I think it gives White just another move to develop because you have to take care of the bishop. Bishop g5, next potentially for White, a rook to d1. And I have to say, I do like the look of this position for Jan Nepomniachtchi.
Yeah, it's a typical Jan Nepomniachtchi position. He's got a slight initiative, easy piece play, and Magnus has a couple of weaknesses. So I think Jan cannot be unhappy at all by what he's got here out of the opening. But Robert, we talked about the match beforehand. This is exactly what Jan needs. He needs a good start, and yeah, this could potentially become quite an exciting match.
For sure. This move b4, it doesn't threaten anything. I think that Jan can just develop knight to d2, then bring that knight to c4, and just increase the potential of your pieces. That rook on a1 is maybe the best piece on the board, because at some point Black would love to play bishop a6. That's not going to happen, and that backwards d-pawn remains an issue.
Yeah, for sure. Jan can now always go knight c4 in case of d6, putting pressure on that pawn. Like you said, move a rook to d1. And he's just got the easier piece play. He's got this open a file for his rook in case Magnus moves his bishop, let's say to e6. There's always going to be an annoying rook a6 move, so that is why we see that Magnus has paused the thing again. I think Jan, he's doing pretty well here so far.
And let's be honest, Benjamin, did you expect at all that Jan would take a game like that in the first one where it seemed like a very typical Magnus type of position, better? Could you have expected Jan to take that first game and then now have a slightly better position in the game two?
I did not expect it. I did not expect it. But Magnus has to be a little bit careful. He's going down on the clock again. We saw in game one he had a dominant position. But with only seconds on the clock, really anything can happen. A 1 second increment really is not a whole lot, and everyone makes big mistakes.
And it's part of Jan's overall match strategy. We saw that yesterday. He likes to be faster than his opponent. And speaking of faster, this knight goes to c4. And look at how quickly it will land on e3 and f5 and d5. And watch out, because if you get knight d5, that knight on f6 is pinned. And if you do take, let's say, a bishop on d5, after e takes d5, there are checkmating ideas across the diagonal.
Exactly, yeah. Jan would love to open up this diagonal. g5, wow, is he gonna go for it? Knight takes g5?
Sack it. Yeah, look at the time, look at Black's king. Benjamin, come on, would you be able to resist?
I mean, perhaps, but I don't think Jan will be able to. I think he's gonna go for it. So let's see, so takes, queen e6. What exactly is the follow-up, Robert?
I haven't figured that out, but f4 is typically a good move to play when your opponent's king is open, and you're trying to open not just the f file, but also the diagonal from b1 to h7 for checkmating ideas. It looks scary, and Jan probably wants to make sure he at least has a bailout. And for everyone who's watching, that's important. Maybe he sees a variation where he can at least force the draw. He probably didn't, so he goes bishop to g3, and as you see, the x marks the spot, but it also marks the miss. Knight takes g5 was better.
Yeah, bishop g3, he still keeps an initiative. He has pressure on the e5 pawn. Also, in case Magnus goes d6, he has pressure there. So perhaps he feels like he has an advantage here as well, and so it wasn't necessary to go for it. But Robert, that might have been a missed opportunity. I like what you suggested there with king on g5, followed by f4.
It looks like it just blasts open the Black king side, but perhaps Jan, he he trusts himself, of course. He's a very intuitive player, but he knows that at sometimes he has gone a little bit too far. And so I think your point is well taken, Benjamin. His position is still good. In fact, the eval bar is the same now as if knight takes g5. So why did he have to sacrifice material? He says, let me just play this very good-looking position. And we keep talking about this. Jan, you know who beats Jan the most? Is himself. So he does not want to do that in this match.
Yeah, 93 here in the meantime. Nice move by Jan. Knight d8 by Magnus. All right, so let's see what Jan's going to do here. I mean, he can move rook to d1. Rook a7 is a possibility. Knight d8 looks a little bit odd to me, as I don't see where the knight is headed. It cannot go to e6 as you allow the knight to jump to f5. We see just rook fe1 by Jan. And again, this is where he's good at. He's got a lead on the clock. He's got that initiative. And Magnus is struggling so far.
And I'm trying to figure out why it could... Oh my goodness. There's some tactics, I think, with like a knight d4 and a knight d5 if black is not careful. That's what rook e1 might have set up here, because there's going to be a checkmate on the h7 square. This is getting very difficult for Magnus, and he plays bishop b6. So I'm wondering, the bishop's defended on b6 now. That might be a huge difference. No, knight
but he
d4
can still wait, knight d4, yeah, in case you take, there might be moves like knight d5 combined with a timely e5 push, and white always has that checkmating idea here on h7. So I think after knight d4, black might have to take with the bishop to stop white from putting a knight on f5.
But that looks terrible. So he goes rook to b1. How can you blame him from changing his rook to pin this bishop on b6? And that's why Magnus defends it. But can we get an analysis board? I think knight d4 is super instructive, giving up a minor piece in the center to try to checkmate the enemy king.
Right, because if you take it, then you go knight d5, attacking the queen and the knight. If you take the knight, white's going to recapture. The queen is under attack, and you threaten checkmate over here, so white wins. And in case you play queen e6, then, well, you can take the bishop, but there's also all these e5 ideas with that idea to deliver checkmate over here. So let's see if Jan is going to go for it. He's just paused, and usually when Jan pauses, he comes up with something interesting. He's played h4, though.
Oh, and we see as the game continues, there are trades now, and h4 it earned a question mark because it wasn't as quick as he needed to be, and bishop takes e3 earned an exclamation point. Now, Benjamin, as we see these moves, it looks like white still has potential to attack, but that knight on e6 is such a strong piece. There's no longer knight f5, and that means that black is probably out of the woods.
Exactly. That knight jumping to f5 really was the sting in black's position. Magnus just took that out. And now you cannot take the pawn on g5, because if you take black has knight to g4, attacking the queen and opening up this attack on the knight, and so you lose a piece. So here, Magnus is doing absolutely fine, and now the time is evened out. So let's see how Jan will handle this situation.
And I think that not only is Magnus doing fine, you see the eval bar saying about zeros. I kind of like black's position. Like right now, knight h5, maybe we'll get a knight f4. And that's exactly what's happening. And g4 comes to mind at the right moment if you want to go all in for the attack. But I just feel like black's pieces are freer, and that c3 pawn, that's the worst single pawn on the board.
Yeah, the pawn on c3 is quite weak. The pawn on d6 is still weak as well, but after rook d1, you can just defend it with rook to d8. Also, I think if anything, Magnus is more likely to take advantage of the open h-file. He can go king g7, followed by rook to h8, knight c5, a nice move by Magnus, attacking the pawn on e4. So Jan just has to slide back, and here we go, Robert, king g7.
You're on point right now. Oh, rook to d1. Is there a g4 coming? I'd first defend the d6 pawn. That looks too weak, so it goes rook d8. g4 can happen next. Rook h8, queen h4. That will happen, and it will hurt. And also bishop a6, knight e2 check. Let's not forget about that.
Yeah, now this looks unpleasant for Jan. He goes bishop to g3. One thing Magnus has to be careful of is not to go g4 too quickly, as there might be some knight takes e5 tactics. We see queen at e3. All right, this looks very tough for Jan. I don't see what he's going to do. And Magnus has this very easy plan of going queen f6, queen h6, and checkmate along the h-file.
So what is he going to do after queen f6? The queen h6 is next. He might have to, after that, put a knight on h2 and pray that his bishop on g3 holds everything together. It looks bad, but I don't see the actual breakthrough.
Yeah, no, for sure. But Magnus has turned this one completely around. He seemed to be under a lot of pressure. He's got to speed up here, though. He's dropping down to 40 seconds. He takes on f3. Interesting decision. I guess now he wants to go queen e6, move his queen over to the h-file, as now there's no longer knight h2.
And the queen on e6 is better than the queen on f6. If king f1, first of all, there's checkmate at 1, but just in general, there's queen c4 type of ideas. So the point is the queen is staring in both directions, and that's why it's probably a better square than f6.
Right, we see Jan going rook to d1, perhaps clearing the way a little bit for his king. So now let's see what Magnus is going to do. So in case of queen h6, do we have queen g4? He starts with rook to h6. Wow, what is the idea behind this one?
I think he's just defending the d6 pawn so his queen can go to c4, a2. He's going to start going after the white queen side. Queen b3 is an option here. The c3 pawn is loose. Or he'll focus all his attention on the king side, but I don't know how to make a checkmate happen.
Yeah, queen b3, good move, putting some pressure on pawn on c3. All right, so let's see what Jan is going to do here. It looks extremely tough. I don't see an active idea here for him anymore. He goes for step 1.
94. Knight takes c4.
Magnus could just take this pawn, and he goes for it.
That queen is overloaded, and that's what the rook's doing on h6. If queen g4, there's always rook g6 to block the check.
Oh, Robert, look at this. Instead of knight f6, he had queen takes d1, rook h1, and knight takes f2, leading to a winning endgame.
Let's bring up an analysis board if we can. Maybe let's wait actually till the game ends, and then we'll pull up one after, but that was such a good find by you. This still looks good for Magnus if he gets his queen to h8. That's what he's aiming for.
But look at how creative Jan is with his defense. He's maneuvered his bishop from f1 to d3 to f5 to h3 to block the h-file. And now the pawn on d6. Wait, and Magnus only has 2 seconds. Wait, take on e5?
He just dropped his central pawn. That is unacceptable because now your winning chances are not very high. And this position, do you still think Magnus is trying to win it?
I think so, but I don't think he should. I mean, rook f5 just looks like a draw.
Yeah, rook c1 check, he gets you knight takes f2. There's no checkmate because rook takes f4 gets rid of the mating pawn.
What a throw by Magnus.